Cuban authorities condemn the US State Department's inclusion of the island on its blacklist of countries that it claims do not fully cooperate on counter-terrorism. Russia and China have condemned the moves by the United States to further pressure certain countries taking advantage of the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in Israel on Wednesday for talks on regional security and the country's plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Cuban authorities condemn the US State Department's inclusion of the island on its blacklist of countries that it claims do not fully cooperate on counter-terrorism. Carlos FtS, Director General for the United States at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, tweeted that Cuba is a victim of terrorism and stressed that there is a long history of terrorist acts committed by the US government against the island, as well as the complicity of US authorities with individuals and organizations that have organized, financed and executed such acts from US territory. The official also stressed the comprehensive extraterritorial nature of the coercive restrictions of the criminal US blockade against Cuba, which seriously limits its development. In the United States, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee has stressed that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has refused to provide details on the armed incursion into Venezuela on May 3rd. Republican Congressman Eliot Engel demanded a response from the Trump administration regarding the planning of the so-called Operation Gideon, which sought to undertake a coup in Venezuela and kidnap President Nicolas Maduro. On Tuesday, Venezuelan Vice President for Communications Jorge Rodriguez informed that the Foreign Affairs Committee of the lower house of the US Congress had demanded information from the US government regarding the events. Pompeo has denied involvement but failed to provide any other information. Meanwhile, Venezuelan military authorities announced on Wednesday the arrest of a further mercenary involved in the failed armed incursion of May 3rd as part of the ongoing operation aimed at capturing all those involved in the foiled plot, led by extremist sectors of the Venezuelan opposition and supported by the governments of Colombia and the United States. More than 40 people linked to Operation Gideon have already been captured. The Latin American and Caribbean region this Wednesday surpassed 400,000 confirmed coronavirus cases, with the death toll reaching over 23,000. Brazil continues to be the worst hit country in the region, with almost half of all cases reported. Brazilian health authorities have registered more than 180,000 cases and over 12,000 fatalities. The number of cases now places Brazil in 6th place worldwide. Peru is the second hardest hit country in the region, having reported more than 72,000 cases and a death toll of over 2,000. Mexico climbed up to 3rd place after reporting more than 38,000 positive cases and nearly 4,000 fatalities. And dozens of nurses have protested in the Brazilian capital Brasilia to honour 100 of their colleagues killed by COVID-19 in the past month.
Unfortunately, Brazil leads the ranking of nurses who lost their lives to COVID-19, even more so than the countries that had a larger number of cases in proportion. This worries us a lot. We want to express here that taking care of nursing is taking care of Brazil, and that we are not superheroes. We are human beings. We are afraid. We suffer from anguish. We have own struggles. And while we only want more respect, we want to stop these deaths.
Mexico saw its highest daily rise in COVID-19 deaths on Tuesday, confirming more than 350 fatalities. Meanwhile, nearly 2,000 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours. While Mexico ranks 3rd in Latin America in terms of the number of confirmed cases, it comes 2nd place in terms of COVID-19 deaths, with nearly 4,000 fatalities reported. The largest number of cases are concentrated in Mexico City at over 10,500, representing almost a third of those reported across the entire country. In 2nd place is the metropolitan area of the state of Mexico, followed by the state of Baja California in the northwest of the country. The Chilean government ordered a mandatory quarantine for the capital, Santiago, on Wednesday after 2,260 new coronavirus cases and 12 deaths were reported in the last 24 hours.
The most severe measure that I must announce by instruction of the President of the Republic is a total quarantine in Greater Santiago.
Small businesses reopened in the Argentinian capital Buenos Aires on Tuesday for the first time since a nationwide lockdown was imposed on March 20th. Residents of the capital can now go out to shop following a system based on their national ID numbers in order to avoid mass gatherings. Outside of Buenos Aires and its metropolitan area, where there are less COVID-19 cases, governors have authorized more businesses to reopen, including shopping centers. Argentina has confirmed more than 6,500 coronavirus cases and over 300 deaths. The capital is the worst hit area in the country, having reported more than 2,700 cases and over 100 fatalities.
From Tuesday on, the bookstores, flower shops, toy stores, perfume shops, decorations, electrical materials, household appliances, and musical instrument shops will be open from Tuesday. The idea is that they don't open at the same time, that's why we are going to do it in 3 steps.
The Caribbean community has issued a legal opinion on the responsibility of cruise ship companies to bear the cost of isolating crew members that hope to disembark in CARICOM member states.
In member states, and this is the relevant one, in member states whose legal systems are based on the common law, courts should declare the cruise companies have a common law duty of care to protect the general population from the risk of harm of contracting COVID-19 in states where crew members are being repatriated. Such a duty of care would require cruise ship companies to bear the cost of a 14-day quarantine of crew members. So in addition to international law, CARICOM is saying that our own common law would make the cruise ships liable.
Haiti has confirmed 10 new cases of the novel coronavirus in the last 24 hours. The Ministry of Public Health informed on Tuesday that the total number of cases reported in the country has now reached 219, while 2 further fatalities were registered, bringing the COVID-19 death toll to 18. In a public address to the nation, Health Minister Dr. Greta Roy-Clement warned that only the Directorate of Epidemiology and the National Research Lab are authorised to provide COVID-19 tests, and encouraged the Haitian population to follow the strict measures issued by the government concerning the use of face masks and social distancing. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. It's been revealed that the Trump administration ignored parts of a detailed Centers for Disease Control and Prevention plan for reopening the United States that was designed to avoid a second wave of coronavirus infections. The CDC report contained detailed guidelines on how to lift lockdown measures in the country while avoiding a resurgence of coronavirus cases. The document advocates a centralized approach with common standards for loosening lockdowns that are much more detailed than the guidelines recently released by the White House. The report was made public as President Donald Trump pushes for state authorities to lift lockdown measures and for businesses to reopen. The US remains the worst hit country by the pandemic in the world, with more than 1.4 million cases and over 84,000 fatalities. The European Union on Wednesday unveiled a plan to help its citizens salvage their summer vacations and resurrect Europe's badly hit tourism industry. The EU is pushing for a safe reopening of borders while insisting on protective measures such as masks on planes to revive what it can of travel for the June to August season, usually worth €150 billion.
We need to work together to keep travel safe as Europe starts to cross borders again. And that is why the European Commission has adopted this package of guidance and recommendations today to coordinate a safe return to travel and tourism this summer. The package is built on the joint European roadmap towards lifting containment, and it's about coordinating, not replacing the work that is being done by businesses, by national and local governments all over Europe.
The United Kingdom has now reported over 40,000 COVID-19 deaths, practically half that of the United States, with less than a fifth of the population. The figures were revealed yesterday by the National Statistics Office, which updated the number of COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes. Despite the UK government saying the worst is over and encouraging all those who can't work from home to return to their jobs, scientists estimate that some 20,000 people a day continue to be infected. Meanwhile, unions have warned that rail services may have to be stopped to protect workers and passengers following crowded scenes on some public transport routes on the first day of the easing of lockdown rules.
I'm a bit worried because some people are not really respecting, they don't have masks and they sit next to you, everybody will need to keep social distance, not because the train is full, but they just do what they like, so it's a bit difficult.
Trains are as they've been since nearly the beginning of the lockdown. Not too many people, but I'm worried when you travel at certain hours, people aren't respecting the 2-metre distance. I've had people sit down in a seat in front of me and just not respect those 2 metres. And I think once there are more people travelling, it's going to be very, very difficult. My other worry is respecting the hours, being able to get to work on time, because I'm a nurse, I can't arrive late for my shift, because there's nurses that need to leave work as well, so as their shifts finish.
During a virtual meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that the United States intends to put further pressure on countries that exercise an independent policy, taking advantage of the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are forced to know that even in the circumstances of the pandemic, our American colleagues and their allies are incessantly trying to ramp up a spirit of confrontation and use the situation to dictate their points of view and vision of a future world order that they call rule-based. But as we all know, they themselves invent these rules. At the same time, they are increasing pressure on countries that have independent foreign policies, making baseless accusations against the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, while calls to temporarily lift unilateral sanctions for the duration of the coronavirus pandemic are ignored.
Russian authorities have made wearing face masks mandatory in some of the country's hardest hit regions as work activities and production are gradually resuming and some restrictions are lifted. The cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg are the worst hit areas. According to the new rules, their residents must wear face masks and gloves in public places, workplaces and when taking public transport. Russia reported the third highest number of coronavirus cases in the world early this week, after Spain and the United States. Meanwhile, health authorities reported more than 10,000 new cases in the last 24 hours on Wednesday, taking the total to over 242,000, while over 2,000 COVID-19 fatalities have been confirmed. China has condemned the COVID-19 Accountability Act, proposed by US Senator Lindsey Graham, that would empower President Donald Trump to impose far-reaching sanctions on China if it fails to give a full account of events leading to the outbreak of the novel coronavirus.
The proposal put forward by individual US senators completely disregards the facts. They attempt to shirk the responsibility of their incompetence and shift the blame to China by launching the investigations and presumption of guilt. This is extremely immoral, and we firmly oppose it. We advise those in the United States not to indulge in the game deeply. We advise relevant politicians in the United States to focus on fighting the epidemic at home and safeguarding the American people's life, do their part well, and play a constructive role in international anti-epidemic cooperation instead of focusing on diverting attention.
And the Chinese mainland reported 7 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, including 6 which were locally transmitted in Jilin province and 1 imported case in Shanghai. The figures provided by the National Health Commission on Wednesday brought the total number of coronavirus cases in mainland China to nearly 83,000. However, no new deaths were reported. Officials in Shulan City, in northeast China's Jilin province, have imposed a lockdown on urban areas and residential compounds after a cluster of infections was reported in the city. According to Gai Dongping, deputy mayor of Jilin, the city of Shulan is now graded as a high-risk area, while its Fengman district has been reclassified as a medium-risk area. And we're taking one last short break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in Israel on Wednesday for talks on regional security and the country's plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. Pompeo met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and incoming Defence Minister Benny Gantz a day before the unity government agreed between the two men is due to be sworn in, following 17 months of political crisis and free elections. Pompeo said he wanted to update both Israeli leaders face-to-face on Donald Trump's vision for peace, which includes the annexation of most of the occupied West Bank territories, categorically rejected by Palestinians and much of the international community.
Global pandemic. You're a great partner. You share information.
And Pompeo's visit coincided with an upsurge in violence in the occupied West Bank, where Israeli troops shot dead a 15-year-old Palestinian in a refugee camp. The funeral for Saeed Qaisia was held at the Al-Fara refugee camp south of the West Bank town of Hebron. The Israeli army claimed troops had entered the camp to make arrests and had been met with a violent riot in which shots were heard and a soldier was slightly injured.
The child was watching the army from the rooftop of their home with his sister. I was standing at the door of their house. I heard women screaming. So I rushed upstairs, and I saw the child, a pool of blood, and his sister screaming. I found him dead. The bullet went through the eye and exiting through the back of his head.
Afghan security forces have been ordered to resume their operations against the enemy after deadly attacks in Jalalabad and Kabul killed dozens of people, including children. President Ashraf Ghani blamed both attacks on the Taliban and the Islamic State group. The Taliban has denied any involvement.
To defend the country, safeguard the countrymen and infrastructure, and to repel attacks and threats by the Taliban and all other terrorist groups.
7 people died on Tuesday during violent protests in Guinea against restrictions imposed to curb the novel coronavirus, according to the country's Interior Ministry. Interior Minister Brima Kondi acknowledged that the death toll was high after taxi drivers clashed with security forces at a checkpoint in the western city of Figuadi. The checkpoint had been set up to restrict movement in the town amid the health crisis due to the pandemic. Other residents joined the riots, which spread to several locations in and around Koya Prefecture. Guinea has reported over 2,300 COVID-19 cases and 14 fatalities, making it one of the hardest hit countries in Western Africa. The Kingdom of Lesotho confirmed its first COVID-19 case on Wednesday to become the last African nation to detect the presence of the virus. There are now more than 69,000 confirmed coronavirus cases across the African continent, with a number of countries imposing a range of prevention and containment measures against the spread of the virus. South Africa remains the hardest hit in terms of the number of cases reported, at more than 11,300, while it's seen over 200 fatalities. Egypt comes next with over 10,000 cases and more than 500 deaths, followed by Morocco with over 6,400 cases and a death toll of nearly 188.
He noted with concern that the Western Cape and Eastern Cape provinces combined
Lebanon has ordered a 4-day-long total lockdown starting Wednesday to stem the spread of the COVID-19 virus after recording an increase in infections in recent days. The country has reported more than 100 new cases over 4 days, which mostly include Lebanese nationals who have returned to the country in recent weeks. The Lebanese information minister said the 4-day lockdown excludes the health, agriculture, food and manufacturing industries, but residents are encouraged to stay home. Shops and restaurants recently started to reopen after the government decided to gradually ease lockdown measures last month.
The situation is definitely difficult, particularly as things get more expensive. Everything is at minimum 40 to 50% more expensive, if not more. So we're putting up with high expenses, especially because of the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Lebanese pound, because Lebanon imports everything.
I can take a lot of money from my clients. I just can't. I just take a little bit. As much as they can afford, it's okay.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.